Welcome to another edition of Outro, the show about shows, the show dealing with shows, the show that shows you things about shows right here on the writer Albert Lanier channel. I, of course, am the writer Albert Lanier, here with another edition of Outro. Now, I recently did an interview on the show Reserved Seats, which can be found on the Deleted Scenes channel on YouTube. That's the Deleted Scenes channel on YouTube. I believe it's at Deleted Scenes if you're looking it up on YouTube or if you want to look it up. And so I did that last night. I had a good time on the show, and it was an interesting conversation. It was a lively, interesting conversation. And so I was there as I have been on other shows, promoting my podcasts and promoting my newsletters on Substack. And one of the things I talked about when I was on Reserved Seats, which I wouldn't normally talk about, but I found myself talking about a little, was the fact that interviews have changed for me. Interviews are very different for me. I've been interviewed since 2009. It was the first time I'd been interviewed in my life. And I had never gone anywhere near media, meaning as someone who was a potential interviewee. I had worked as a newspaper journalist and as a magazine writer for 22 years, as anyone who knows anything about me on this channel or off this channel knows. And my attitude was, I'm here to interview people. I'm not here to get interviewed. Interviewing's for politicians, for movie stars, for musicians, celebrities, that ilk. I don't know if ilk is the right word, but that constellation of people. It's not for me. My job's to interview people, not to be interviewed. But I started doing interviews in 2009. I was on a show called The Newsmaker Show on a radio station called WLEA in Hornell, New York. Hornellsville, I believe, is the proper town name, but Hornell, New York. And I ended up doing other interviews on other stations. I was on I ended up doing an interview on another show on the same station. What happened was that I had done the Newsmaker Show, and someone in that station was listening to it and called me up and said, "Could you do an interview on my show?" And I went, "Yeah, why not?" So I think the next week, I think it was a weekend show, I ended up doing his show, which sadly I've forgotten the name of. Hello to those in the chat. And so I did that, and then I ended up doing a show in Corning, New York. I think it was called Frankly Speaking. And then I ended up doing more shows, more parts of the country, radio shows, podcasts. And when I started being interviewed, I was being interviewed about articles I had written, subjects I had researched, areas that I looked into. And it was about discussion and conversation. And what's changed for me is because I had started the newsletter Final Cut last year on Substack, and this year did the Retro Review newsletter, separate new newsletter. And because I got into podcasting, what happened was that I ended up changing the trajectory of interviews for me. So interviews for me became about promotion and marketing what my projects were and what my projects are and what outlets of mine and what's going on with outlets of mine. And so that's what occurred and that's what happened. And so that became the preoccupation. So much like people who go on these late night talk shows, like Colbert Show before it was canceled, or the Tonight Show, or any of these other shows, I'm on there to talk about something. I'm there to promote something. I'm there to, just talk up an outlet or a project of mine. So it's become very different for me. And I talked a little about that. And also, it was interesting because I got into a conversation about film reviewing that and being a film critic that I'm sure will be slightly controversial to some, or a tad controversial, because I name names and I state that a lot of what I see in terms of so-called YouTube film reviewing or film criticism is nothing of the sort. It's not real film reviewing and it's not real film critique. I don't believe that you can be a film reviewer on YouTube. And I don't believe you can be a film reviewer on TikTok. I don't believe that you can be I believe that you can analyze, and people do that all the time. One of the things that I pointed out in the interview, and I'll point out here, is I don't have a problem with most film channels. People do analysis on the film channels or they talk about it. I don't have a problem with that. I don't have an issue with that. I think it's perfectly fine. I think it's perfectly great. But I do have a problem with film reviewers and so-called film critics because I don't think that you can do a film review on YouTube. Now, technically you can, but I don't believe you can, or on TikTok. And a lot of these people that are so-called film influencers or movie promoters on TikTok, and other places, a lot of these people are basically paid. They basically have been bribed by the major studios. They're basically paid puppets. Paramount, Universal, and 20th Century Fox, and Disney, and all these other major studios. And from the standpoint of the major studios, it makes sense to me. I mean, why not take these schmucks and and these simpletons who know absolutely nothing about movies, at least a good amount of them, and put some money into their pocket and bring them out to a film premiere or a film junket, even though they're ignorant and uneducated. And even if they do have an education, it's not about film. It's not cinema studies or film studies or anything like that. They're not journalists, they're not film scholars, and they're not filmmakers. They're film takers, is what I would call it. They're people that take money to talk about movies, and usually bad movies, but they're film takers. They're not filmmakers. And they're not film reviewers or film critics. They're basically fans with opinions. Now, I kind of expressed some of this in the comment section of one video, which was a kind of tier rating of film critics. And they ended up doing a video. The guy ended up doing a video about that, which I'm not going to talk about here. I mentioned it on the show, but I'm not going to talk about that here. So when we got into that discussion, I named names, and you can go to that episode and you can find out what names I named. I'm not going to mention them. I'm not going to mention them here. Excuse me. But what I would say is that when I was a film reviewer, and I was a film reviewer for about 8 years, I was primarily a journalist and I was primarily a freelance writer. And that was my background. You know, my background was as a professional, not only as a professional journalist and professional press person, but also just as a professional writer overall. There's an interesting comment here in the chat. Let me cite it. It's from TubeU. Like that name. I miss the days of Gene Siskel, Roger Ebert, Leonard Maltin, and Gene Shalit. As do I. And that's one of the reasons I've spoken out against these pretenders to the throne. Right, precisely. Tube U mentions these four were journalists and authors. Absolutely right. Absolutely right. Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert were both journalists. As I mentioned on the show, Gene Siskel wrote for the Chicago Tribune. I believe he'd gone to Yale and got his education. Roger Ebert had gone to the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, I think for his bachelor's. He was in a PhD program in the University of Chicago, which is quite a good school, and in English lit. And these were both journalists. These were both writers who became film critics. So these were professional writers and professional journalists. Gene Shalit was never a favorite critic of mine. Roger Ebert is. I'll make no bones about that. Gene Shalit was on the Today Show, qualified. I think he was somebody who was in broadcast. So he was a broadcast. He was a broadcast critic, and so that's one of the things I point out in my, because I was asked what is the definition of a film reviewer or a film critic, and that's what I pointed out on the show. So Tube U makes a very good point here. It says they were four journalists, and Leonard Maltin is actually the Disney historian, the historian for Disney. So he's the one who's actually written books about Disney and examined Disney movies. And I've read his work, and Maltin was a decent critic on Entertainment Tonight. I think he's better as kind of a film writer and a film historian. And I know, the Disney historian, technically Disney historian. So I like his books on Disney, or like this book. I think he wrote at least one or two. Forgive me for not knowing all his books that he wrote. But I agree, they were journalists, they're professionals, they're writers, and they became film critics. So, it was an interesting discussion, not only about that, but about other things. And I would strongly recommend, for those who are very interested in movies, especially, talking about movies, and not only that, but film critiquing and film criticism and film. Check out that episode. Reserved Seats. It's on the Deleted Scenes channel on YouTube. Again, I believe that's at Deleted Scenes on YouTube. Again, that's the Deleted Scenes channel on YouTube. The name of the show, Reserved Seats. Again, the name of the show, Reserved Seats. And so I had a good time. I thought it was a nice conversation. It was very enjoyable. I didn't really check out the chat or what was going on in the chat too much, but check that out and check out my other interviews on other shows. So I've been a little busy of late. I may have an interview coming out on another podcast this week. So I may be doing another episode here. And I don't normally do this on the show, but since I've been a little busy with interviews and shows, if you have a YouTube show and you're looking for a guest and you want to have me as a guest, contact me at my email, which is at Imperious Reader. Sorry, not Imperious Reader. Actually, don't contact me via email. Don't contact me via email. Contact me here in the comment section. If you have a YouTube show about movies or about films or about writing, if you're somebody who has a channel about freelance writing, because that's the other thing. I got to talk a little about my podcast, The Write-Off, which can be found at thumbsdown.substack.com. That's thumbsdown.substack.com. And I got to talk a little about that, not a huge amount, because we were discussing other things. And so I would say right now, and again, I don't do this on this program, but if you have a YouTube show about movies or film, and you're not a film reviewer or critic, but you're just a film buff or a film fan, if you have a film channel and you'd like to have a guest on, or you have a writing channel and you'd like to have a guest on, especially if it's freelance writing, let me know below in the comment section. Let me know below. And, let me know, provide your information, at least your YouTube information and stuff like that. And I'll get back in touch with you. right? But I'd like to thank the host of Reserved Seats, Deleted Scenes, for inviting me to the show. I was invited to do the show, so that was great. So I'd like to thank him for having me on the show. And I enjoyed the conversation on the show. I thought it was a good conversation. In fact, I thought it was so good that I had to kind of limit myself because I said, this is 90 minutes. And he made a point that this is a 90-minute show. And so I wanted to make sure that we kept the train coming along, got the train moving, kept the ship sailing. So again, my thanks to Deleted Scenes, as he's known on YouTube, for having me on Reserved Seats. And again, if you have a show on YouTube which deals with films, like you analyze movies or you're into movies, and you have guests or you want a guest, contact me below in the comments section. Or if you have a writing channel, and you talk about writing on your channel and do videos or live streams about that, and maybe you feature a guest, or maybe you'd be interested in having a guest, please contact me below here in the comments section. Again, this is the writer Albert Lanier channel. I am the writer Albert Lanier, and this has been Outro, the show about shows. Show's over. See you later, folks.